Hi, welcome to the Second Rainbow Coalition reading group. We are reading The Young Lords by Johanna Fernandez, and we will begin today with the Statement of Unity. My apologies, I don't have this on my laptop to screen share it, so I'll be reading that off my phone. The preface is, the U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to reservations or concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military interventions and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Excuse me. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. Excuse me. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969 by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriots organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways, around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle. He said, "It's a class struggle, goddammit." By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. The class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition, therefore the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule and subsequently used the entire repressive forces of the state, the police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, excuse me, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All power to the people and boots on the ground. All members of the coalition include the New African Black Panther Party, the White Panther Party, the Green Party of New Jersey, the Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, NASO, the North Alabama School for Organizers, the New Era Young Lords, and the American Indian Movement Northeast Woodland Chapter. The 6 disciplinary rules are: number 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4, members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5, members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And number 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. All right, we will dive into the book now. We are on chapter 10, A Second Occupation. Would anybody like to take a turn reading first?
I'll take a turn.
Awesome. All right, go ahead, Comrade Shea.
The Young Lords Party, long summer of protest in 1970, during which it intrepidity foreshadowed the possibilities and aspirations of socialism at Lincoln Hospital, amplified its political reputation in New York and across the nation. Since its emergence a year earlier, the organization had undergone a meteoric rise in neutrality, slammed in the press by James L. Barkley. Wait a minute. Sorry, something got in the way of it. By James L. Barkley of the Conservative Party and Stanford D. Glavlik, the New York City Council President and former Chief Inspector of the New York Police Department, NYPD, among others at the grassroots. At the grassroots, however, thousands of people had approvingly reached out to the Young Lords seated in their offices, Harlem and the Bronx, to the Lower East Side, opening a new office on September 16, 1970. The Young Lords were now fully known in wider circles of anti-war, women's, gay, lesbian, and transgender liberation, and the Black, Brown, Yellow, and Red Power movement. The protests had also helped revitalize larger sectors of organizers and artists in the Puerto Rican community. Embroidered by continued success, the Lords initiated a series of new projects between September and December 1970. They launched a student initiative, which was the springboard. Where did I go off of? Which was the spring, one of the most sizable mainland pro-Puerto Rican independence march in the history of New York. They reoccupied a floor at Lincoln Hospital residence to initiate a drug treatment center that was lauded as the first of its kind in the Western world. But as summer gave way to autumn, the organization also wrestled with inevitable challenges, including assimilating new membership growth and discipline. internal conflicts, changes in leadership, and heightened repression. The, the, the demolition had lost and loss of beloved Chairman Felipe Luciano, unforeseen tragedy, and a second action at the First Spanish United Methodist Church, FSUMC, would set the Young North Party, YLP, on a new course towards decline, precisely at the moment it had reached its height of success. The chairman's swift demotion in early September 1970 was dramatic and commanded media attention. The group's highest leadership body took their action after Luciano and another member of the Central Committee, Pablo. Pablo. Pablo Guzman leave. One day in late August, the two men simply disappeared. Central Committee members Denise Oliver records that in the context of a heightened repression and threats against the party, the situation sent many into a panic. The organization was on red alert because there was a supposed mob contact out on Felipe. Security was heightened. Two members of the Central Committee went missing, and nobody knew where they were. Approximately 27 hours later, they reappeared with what some perceived as an elaborated excuse. The men suggested that they had been lured into a trap, luckily set by government agents. According to Guzman, two white women approached them with a fundraising proposal, a follow-up to Randall's Island, where the young laws had raised significant funds. They all ended up at the Upper West Side apartment, where, according to Luciano, one of the women offered him a joint that made him hallucinogenic, sick, and suicidal. When he asked her to close the window because he wanted to jump out of it, she opened it wide up. Guzman came to his aid and tried to get they leave. I said no. Whatever took hold of me was so powerful that all I could do was stay in one spot for about 12 hours. I sat erect on a chair, my feet firmly planted on the floor. My first ball up, and I told her. My fist brought up, and I told her, "You brought me up here. You better take me down." When I threw up, the strangest thing happened. I felt totally infinite, and I had made love to the same woman who tried to kill me. The incident raised more questions than any answer. The chairman lamented, "Should I have known?" Yes, in the back of my mind, was I thinking that maybe we could get over? Yes, but we had no idea of the vulnerability of our position, whether this was a government disruption, bad story, or bad trick, didn't seem to matter. These details surfaced amongst distrust produced by the storm of internal dissent led by the women of the organization. The storm raged against sexism, plundering on the part of male members and inequality between the sexes. In concert with leading cadre, Oliver proposed that Luciano and Guzman account for their breach of party discipline at a close disciplinary hearing of the Central Committee and Deputy Minister that included some of the organization's most vocal women. The woman, unwilling to tolerate a disciplinary double standard fueled by sexism, questioned the men. In the past, the Central Committee had some of summarily terminated members who didn't report to assignments or violate firing protocol. Other recalls that the hearing revealed with alarming detail. The other men on the Central Committee knew where Luciano and Guzman were, so did their security detail. Juan Gonzalez asserted that he did not know their whereabouts. The hearing concluded with Felipe Luciano's demolition for Chairman to cadre. Other Oliver remembers that the other men on the Central Committee would likewise be temporarily suspended, charged, and disciplined, and went to set and went and sent to study hall for 2 weeks. This left Oliver the only woman on the Central Committee to run the organization. The man who did not remember having been demoted of the Central Committee's members respond to their demolition. Oliver remembers Fee was a kid, and Fee was like, we fucked up, and Bobby was like, hanging his head in the chain. Remember, we were raised on criticism. We were raised on criticism, self-criticism. You were given criticism, and you had to stand up there and criticize yourself. You were given, okay. We were very Maoist in that way. The ritual of moralistic self-flagellation was a growing feature of life. Central Committee member Juan Posada was familiar with the practice. Months earlier, he had entered into an intimate relationship with a woman different from his own known partner. Gonzalez remembers when the woman's caucus discovered that I was seeing someone else, I was brought up on charges and suspended from Central Committee for 6 weeks. As we will see, the painful mingling of love and politics influenced the culture of the organization, added to the emotional intensity of movements life and the potential to blur political decision making and was likely manipulated by COINTELPRO. Felipe Luciano, who married to Alice Morales, a leading member of the Women's Caucus, the violation came at a big cost, both personally and politically. Luciano had failed the test of discipline and personal transformation to which he subjected others, and because he had become the face of the organization, the demolition would soon become public. The New York Times carried the story almost immediately, quoting young law Carlos Aponte on reasons for the demolition, male chauvinism, unclear politics, political individualism, and lack of development. It seemed that Aponte was speaking as an individual, not as an official young law spokesman, a violation of the organization rules of discipline. No member may speak in public unless authorized by the Central Committee of Central Staff. Aponte was a veteran and experienced organizer, previously active with California left-wing Peace and Freedom Party, which ran radical candidates, including Panther leader Elder Cleaver for president, as part of the secondary leadership of the Young Law Party. He was a critical founding member of the Bronx branch. The development race addressed until later. Aponte asserted that he did not speak to the press. A COINTELPRO agent likely did. The article also cited supposed young law statement on how informers might interpret the 3 days later, directed with a press conference of their own. in which Luciano stated that the motion happened in an atmosphere of love and education. The turn of events elicited different internal responses. Mickey Melendez accepted as a good soldier. He explains, the women's question had just emerged. The men were still trying to figure out what that meant, but there was a sense that we had to sit in temple at the top. There were some, like young Lord Leader Ida Ross Scott, who opposed the public character, that the motion took on for the shame it generated from Luciano. The New York Times coverage must have felt permanent to him, even though many assumed it to be temporary. The struggle public dimension must have inadvertently silenced internal criticism by members of the organization because it singled that stepping out of line carried out a high cause. This movement of leadership transition is also open for COINTEL, was also open for COINTELPRO to explore. But the decision had been made, and key members, including Gloria Fontanez, were local supporters of the demotion. Somebody else read. My eyes is down to burn.
I'm able to pick
I'll
up.
try it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, you go first, comrade, Andy, and then I'll finish up. And I don't know how many more pages we have. If Zen wants to let us know that, and then we can split it up, however, and Zen wants to read a little bit after. How do we do that? But go ahead.
We're reading up to page 315.
Oh, wow.
So that's another 6 pages plus this last paragraph. So if y'all want to do like 3 pages each, that works.
Okay,
Okay, that's cool.
you first, comrade Andy.
Okay, hang on one second. Right. I'm in transition from one room to the other. Hang on. Okay. Let's see. Find my place here. Okay. Luciano's recollections years later offer perspective on the emotional state he was in. Quote, for about 2 or 3 days, I was under scrutiny. After the self-criticism sessions, I was a nervous wreck. I ended up going to Soho, end quote. Influenced by the politics of Black nationalism, which downplayed gender inequality, Luciano tended to see the issues raised by the Women's Caucus as a personal rather than political matter. In Luciano's words, quote, I felt that the conflict was a personal affair between me and Iris, that it should be dealt with in that manner. And they felt this was a party issue, and my behavior indicated what was indicative of the sort of male chauvinism that existed in the party, end quote. Luciano acknowledged the problem of sexism in the organization. Quote, yes, the women were coming up with very legitimate issues, and these strong warriors were aided by the fact that we were basically a male-oriented organization. We had to change. Both women and men in the organization believed that Luciano was undermining the political shift toward political equality among men and women. However, Luciano took the position articulated most adamantly by cultural Black nationalists that the standing of men of color whose manhood had been trampled by racial oppression had to be elevated and prioritized in the struggle for liberation. He continues, quote, the change I felt I had to come organically. It should not come abruptly. That is why in our 13-point program, we had something about machismo, positive machismo. Now, when I say machismo, I'm not talking about the brutalization of women. I'm talking about the ability to stand as a man in your space and say, quote, this institution, this community is mine. It's part of my matrix, and I will not allow anyone to violate the sanctity of my home and family. And so the way we organized a lot of Puerto Rican men in our communities was by telling them that you're beating up your woman is not being a macho. However, even in retrospect, Luciano failed to grasp that his demotion happened a few months after the young lord's women had led a successful internal struggle that altogether rejected machismo as a backwards contradiction and had revised the notion of revolutionary machismo in the group's original 13-point program and platform. A month later, Luciano was still unable to accept his demotion. After his public shaming, the charismatic leader had difficulty assuming the role of cadre. That role included selling newspapers, distributing flyers, carrying out assignments given by the officer of the day, and performing other quiet duties like waking early to cook for children's breakfast program. His personal struggles with ego and humility factored into this. Making matters more difficult was the fact that without a clear definition of his new role, others with long brewing resentments and hostilities against him ran unchecked. The alienated chairman had to navigate these waters alone. In failing to give Luciano a new assignment, the Central Committee abdicated its role. The failure also undermined the organization's self-proclaimed commitment to love and compassion. It contributed to Luciano's withdrawal from party life. The former chairman soon stopped showing up at the office and the meetings and demonstrations. A month later, he left the organization, and Gloria Fontes replaced him in the Central Committee. Luciano had his shortcomings. This was not the first time he disappeared without notice. Yet, in spite of his individualistic streak, he was forward-thinking, clear on what the organization needed to do, and the people in the streets simply liked him. Because he was revered and respected, his departure was demoralizing to many in the group rank and file and the community. With Luciano gone, the young lords lost a brave fighter and inspirational leader. Among his other virtues, he grasped the political value of solidarity between Puerto Ricans and Black Americans. The organization didn't realize it at the time, but in losing Luciano, it also lost the person best positioned to challenge the narrow notion of Puerto Rican nationalism that was underway in the organization, promoted it as was by increasingly influential, particularly authoritarian, emerging cadre. Not the Puerto Rican Student Conference at Columbia. Not long before Luciano's demotion in early September, two members of the Central Committee, Juan Gonzalez and Juan Ortiz, traveled to Puerto Rico. The reasons were manifold. They intended to learn about the different political formations on the island and to plant the seed for a collaborative relationship between the Young Lords Party and the island's left-leaning pro-independence party. Influenced by his new wife and fellow comrade in the organization, Gloria Fontes, Gonzalez explored the terrain for branch building in Puerto Rico, an idea that was supported by one or two members of the Central Committee, but would not be revealed to the party cadre until much later. The more immediate task before Gonzalez and Ortiz was to meet with island students who were leading mass anti-war protests against Reserve Officer Training Corps, the ROTC, at the University of Puerto Rico. Gonzalez and Ortiz wanted to invite leaders of the pro-independence student movement, Frente Universitario Pro Independencia, to join them at the Puerto Rican Student Conference in New York, scheduled for a month later at Columbia University on September 22nd and 23rd. Back on the mainland, the YLP was turning its attention not to another dramatic takeover, but to a far less flashy goal: student organizing. In August, just before the start of the school year, the Lords had partnered with the Puerto Rican Students Union to begin a series of student initiatives at local high schools and colleges. The Puerto Rican Student Union emerged a year early in September 1969 to bring together Puerto Rican students who had been involved over the past 2 years in various protests across New York City. In the effort to ban the ROTC from recruiting on City University of New York CUNY campuses, to establish a Department of Black and Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter, Lehman, and Brooklyn colleges, and to create an open admissions standard throughout the city's public colleges. The Young Lords and the PRSU consolidated the relationship at the Puerto Rican Student Conference at Columbia University. Approximately 800 students in attendance heard speeches by members of the PRSU, the YLP, and the Frente Universitario Pro Independencia. The titles of the weekend's workshops typify both the big picture thinking of students organizing in the 1960s and the broad variety of topics that the Young Lords deemed essential for radical social change. Third world unity, quote, the draft and the military, the role of women in revolutionary struggle, political prisoners, socialism, media and education. Another workshop, Latin American and Latin unity, suggests that the Young Lords were forging a new identity based on common experiences of people migrating to cities such as New York from Latin America after having been displaced by a Cold War era U.S. military and economic interventions in places like Guatemala in 1954, the Dominican Republic in 1965, among others. In fact, through regular use of the term Latin, the Young Lords were among the first to conceptualize the term Latino, Latina. Their rendition of the term, however, underscored a shared political experience of regional underdevelopment produced by the U.S. political and economic domination rather than contemporary appeals to Latinidad on the basis of language and culture alone. The conference closing remarks included speeches by radicals of Chicano, Cuban, and Dominican descent. The summary of the last panel observed that the Dominican presenter eloquently, quote, eloquently linked the struggles for unity and freedom of the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, which can only be accomplished, said he, through militant opposition to outside oppression and eventual socialism in the Dominican Republic of Puerto Rico. Okay, where's the group embraced a pan-Latinx orientation, despite the hard nationalist turn it was about to take. The conference took place on the second anniversary of El Grito de Lares, the first recorded rebellion against foreign rule in Puerto Rico. And a number of conference sessions focused on the history of Puerto Rico's independence movement and the island's contemporary politics. At its closing session, the Young Lord conveners encouraged participants to sign a pledge saying that they would organize Liberate Puerto Rico Now committees in high schools and on college campuses. This marked the first tangible initiative to make Puerto Rico independence and organizational focus and priority of the party. The myriad campus activities that followed took on an organizational life of their own. But the PRSU was influenced by the Young Lords' politics. Although the PRSU remained independent from the Young Lords, its members began to wear red berets. Over the next year, the Liberate Puerto Rico Now committees became the basis which the PRSU and the Young Lords developed Marxist-Leninist chapters in New York universities. These linked Puerto Rican independence to anti-war protests and struggles of the Vietnamese and challenged the emerging political backlash, the surge in school regulations, and the suppression of free speech and political associations in high schools. The chapters also supported the overhaul of Eurocentric academic curricula and the introduction of inter-ethnic studies. The Columbia Conference and the activities initiated in its immediate aftermath laid the groundwork for an impressive turnout at the Young Lords' Free Puerto Rico Now March to the United Nations on October 30th, 1970. That march began a gradual shift in the Young Lords' political perspective. Heightened repression. Since their formation in the summer of 1969, the Young Lords had been object of police surveillance, harassment, and arrests. Justifications for their surveillance came from New York City Council President Stanford D. Gerlich, a highly visible politician. He attributed criminal and violent intent to the Young Lords' politics and militancy. Motivated by a regressive agenda, Gerlich lumps the Black Panthers and the Young Lords together with the Weather Underground, a white splinter group of students for a democratic society. He denounced them as armed terrorist group and accused each of terrorism. Historically, authorities have invoked the term terrorist to criminalize organizers and dissidents. By the classic 19th century definition, however, most U.S. radicals of the 1960s were not terrorists. They were not individual actors using violence to intimidate or instill fear among civilians as a strategy for advancing their cause. Nevertheless, in the late 1960s, politicians began to use the term against radicals of all stripes, including a small sector of radicals who employed violence as a political strategy, but who weren't terrorists either. Epitomized by the Weather Underground, these actors turned to armed propaganda against property and the symbols of government power. National independence movements deployed similar strategies against sites of colonial military and political power in places like Palestine, Algeria, and South Africa. The term guerrillas more accurately describes these international actors. Gerlich was building upon existing blueprint. A decade earlier, conservatives in the country began to link civil rights demands to the communist boogeyman. But the political ascendancy of third world guerrilla communists in places like Vietnam and Cuba, terrorism came to replace communism as a, quote, growing peril. Gerlich also deployed the term guerrilla against them. He told the New York Times, "These are urban guerrillas, the outgrowth of an era of disrespect for law and acceptance of a Maoist philosophy of guerrilla warfare." Again, given the growing legitimacy of decolonization movements, Gerlich employed the language of race ideology, disrespect of the law, to suppress and stigmatize activists of color. In addition to criminalizing radicals of color, the logic mandated respect for authority as a precondition to claims on the right to redress. These regressive narratives did not emerge by happenstance. As we have seen, their logic was crafted earlier in the decade by the Madison Avenue public relations firm hired by the city's powerful police union to defeat the Civilian Complaint Review Board at the polls in 1966. Let's see. Though the Young Lords had not employed weapons during their campaigns, the organization's political platforms supported armed struggle, quote unquote armed struggle. In addition to conversation with the New York Times in March 1970, Pablo Guzman had said, quote, "The only way to achieve liberation is by picking up guns. And we're moving our people in that direction," end quote. The statement spoke of events to come. At around the same time, the Weather Underground began its underground bombing campaigns of state buildings and university sites where faculty were contributing research and technology to the military-industrial complex. Believing, like many others, that world revolutionary crisis was on the horizon, Weatherman activities were launched in solidarity with third world anti-imperialist revolutions abroad. At home, they were galvanized by the Black Power movement and welcomed the idea that their violent propaganda would redirect straight oppression away from the Black Panther Party. Quite the opposite, it turns out. Historically, those committed to revolution have accepted that they perceive as an inevitable in revolutionary situation, that armed struggle is a necessity in the process of wresting power from the armed opposition forces of the state. For these actors, the use of violence and armed force is not the main issue of concern. More important is the question of timing, and even more central in the debates within the revolutionary left is the relationship between those, quote, picking up the gun and the mass mobilization of people at the bottom of society. In this instance, the Young Lords, like others in the New Left, were either engaging in or considering the use of violence for several reasons. Some believe widespread rebellion was on the horizon. In reality, the movements were on a path of decline. Others saw mounting state repression as a reason to embrace the right to self-defense within their relatively small groups, which they confused with a defense of the masses in their communities. Amid this disorientation and siege mentality produced by state repression, radicals became somewhat isolated from their communities. They began to see themselves increasingly as enlightened actors. Before long, they began to substitute the painstaking task of grassroots mobilization with heroic acts of sacrifice taken on behalf of, quote, the people. Although the young lords did not experience the same homicidal state repression that befell the Black Panthers, the NYPD increased its repression and arrests of their members after December 1969 occupation of the FSUMC in East Harlem. 6 months later, in June 1970, when the young lords led a spontaneous march in East Harlem protesting the beating by a policeman of a teenager. Riot gear police descended on their office. According to young lords, when the bottle hit one of the police vans, likely hurled by the combative crowd of community residents gathered outside, the police jumped out of their trucks like John Wayne on the range and went crazy, beating every Puerto Rican they could catch, old and young alike. By the end of the class, the young lord was unconscious on the pavement, and two others, David Pelou Jacobs and Benjamin Cruz, were arrested and beaten in the police van and at the precinct, suffering serious head injuries and fractures. The same month, the group's youngest Central Committee member, 16-year-old Juan F. Ortiz, was arrested and charged with kidnapping, robbery, and assault of Jack McCall, who, according to the Lords and neighborhood reports compiled by the mayor's urban task force, had taken to soliciting monetary contributions on behalf of Young Lords Party without the group's authorization. When police arrested Ortiz based on McCall's testimony, the Young Lords called a rally in East Harlem to protest what they believed to be a police setup. Ortiz was released soon after, but the demonstration against his arrest the next day attracted hundreds of Black and Puerto Rican youth. At the start of the rally, David Perez, another member of the group's Central Committee, was arrested, plucked out of the crowd of hundreds by plainclothes pigs, suggestive of a premeditated campaign by the police to arrest or frame the formal leaders of the group. Later that night, after the demonstration wound down, throngs of teenagers, many of whom had likely joined the Young Lords' protest, began to riot. A dozen firemen and 7 policemen were injured when called to the scene. In the aftermath, the police made public statements linking Young Lords with the disturbances. The group's public reputation was cleared when the New York Times and other media sources published testimonies of shopkeepers and eyewitnesses who maintained that the group was absent when the rioting began. On several separate occasions, members were taken into custody for offenses so petty that they were dismissed immediately by judges who found the arrest ungrounded or the charges excessive. The Young Lords' public pronouncements about the right of people of color to armed self-defense increased in relation to growing number of targeted campaigns of state violence and political disruption against them and other movement persons. Just a month before the police beat and arrested Young Lords in front of their office, the country witnessed tragedy at Kent State University. On May 4th, the Ohio National Guard opened fire on unarmed students protesting U.S. invasion of Cambodia, killing 4 protesters and wounding 9 others. The Young Lords' perspective developed in context of the highly publicized framing a year earlier in April 1969 by NYPD and COINTELPRO of 21 Black Panther Party members. The Panther 21 were falsely accused, tried, and eventually acquitted of planning coordinated bombing and armed attacks on the Board of Education office in Queens and 2 police precincts, the 44th and 24th in Bronx and Manhattan, respectively. The psychological impact on radicals of mounting arrests, beatings, and surveillance was profound. It distorted their sense of reality and ability to properly assess the political character of the period. Like others during the period, the Young Lord Party inaccurately assessed the moment. They interpret mounting state repression as a sign the United States was galloping into fascism. Significantly, they believed a revolutionary situation was underway among a broad sector of the population, which legitimized the party to, quote, pick up the gun. Okay. Do I stop there? I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually where we're stopping for the day. And my apologies, I just noticed the page numbers there because I got a call from back home in the middle of this. So my apologies, Comrade Joe, you will be the first to get to read tomorrow.
I'm sorry. I was
it's okay. I mean,
was
like,
on automatic pilot
yeah,
there.
no. As long as we're all doing our due diligent part and helping out and reading, that's what's most important. Not just any one of us reading. So that I don't mind reading the next time.
Okay.
Good. I don't mind you reading either. I'm wore out.
I know. I probably should have like put my camera face on and then said like, "Hey, I'll take over." But I always try to be polite.
I know you do.
But great reading, comrades, Che and Andy. Thank you.
That was good. That was good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You guys
we're-
both did really good with that today.
This is a hard period of time for me to reflect on because when I was in Ohio as a young man, I turned 21 in 1969, and I joined the SDS for a whole lot of questionable reasons. But one is the war, friends were getting drafted, all these things were happening. But the chapter that I joined in Columbus was affiliated with the National SDS, and they were part of the split that happened. And the Ohio people were from Kent State and Ohio State, and I think there was some from Antioch and a couple other schools in Ohio. But the Ohio block went to the National SDS convention and affiliated with what became known as the Weatherman Group. And that group went from one thing into another thing, in a short period of time. Part of it was all this paranoia, police repression, and you had all these throughout the movement at that time, which was made up of young people, mostly in their early 20s. You had the state coming after everybody, wholesale. You were identified as enemies. You could be like walking to a bus stop. One time in Columbus, Ohio, a group of us were walking to the bus stop. We were going to take a bus, and we all got arrested for vagrancy and thrown in jail. Well, we all of us had money in our pocket, all these kinds of things. So like we felt like you're under constant surveillance. You're in a hostile territory. We were trying to do what the Young Patriots did successfully in Columbus. We were trying to organize in Appalachian poverty-stricken neighborhoods, but the police weren't having it. I mean, they they sent Klansmen in and Minutemen in to organize these young people to beat the hell out of us, which they did. And so you got a situation where people were all mixed up in with, then they added LSD to the mix, so that you were hallucinating in a world of terror. I mean, there was all the people reminisce about the 60s and how wonderful it was. It was mostly a shit show. I'll tell you right now. It was there was plenty of people that didn't make it out of there. And it was like I counted 20 young people that I knew who died in this process directly related to their political involvement. I knew all the guys, all the kids that got killed in the bombing of the townhouse in New York. I knew every one of them. I knew the kids, all the kids in the goddamn Symbionese Liberation Army. One of them worked with me, and all these incredibly fanciful notions of what revolution meant were on full display. And as people in the Black community and the Puerto Rican community were taking the heavy hits. I mean, that never stopped, that never changed. But these young white radicals who call themselves being revolutionaries or calling themselves leaders and stuff like that, they have basically, most of them had no connection to the working class. So when I read this thing from the perspective of the young lords, exactly parallel time, what they were doing in New York when I was in California and screwing up all over the place. They were down with the community, see, and that wasn't even impossible in a lot of sections of the white working class community, like a lot when the kids got killed at Kent State, a lot of the kids came to California, and we said, well, oh, well, you used to be at Kent State. Why are you in California now? And they said, well, our parents said that they wished that the National Guard would have killed more of us. So we're done with Ohio, and we're done with our parents, and the white communities, working class communities, saw themselves in opposition to the Puerto Rican and Black communities largely. They were still, an untrustworthy section as far as the working class goes. Now, however, we start to see breaks across the board in this country, where the white Appalachian communities, for instance, the poorest community in the country, they're done with these people. And so the revolutionary appeal, the revolutionary propaganda, the revolutionary appeal can finally unite this class that's been disunited forever because of white supremacy and the bribe of the material bribe of the white working class. That's what we come through all this hell to get to where we are, which is to look into an abyss of a deeper hell unless we're successful. So I have a lot of personal feelings about this particular time in history, because it was the time that I became involved in one short year. I went from being a college student to doing 3 months for assault on a police officer. It's like a big time in history, and we're getting ever closer to an even more profound change in this society. This society is on shaky ground, really shaky ground. So that's what I have to add. I'm sorry I go on and on, but I had a lot of personal feelings about this one.
Definitely do not apologize for how long it takes to tell the stories. These things are incremental to our understanding of what's already happened in the past that we can learn from in order to move forward. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have any thoughts to jump in here with? No?
I do. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I
Hiya.
got on late. I got off of work. My schedule always changes. And they had me closed today. Hope everyone is doing well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Ditto.
thanks.
And thank you so much for sharing, Andy. That story was great. And it's always great to hear firsthand experiences and how it parallels to experiences across the nation. Just because it ties us together, it unifies us together, and those stories don't get lost, right? And just on the book reading, I just wanted to say that it's crazy how anytime that people come together and stand up for what is supposed to be a right for everyone, it applies differently when we look a certain way or act a certain way. And then we're labeled terrorists if we fight for our rights, for our equality, if we go against the grain and the system. But I'm not surprised. And it's all about trying to control and put fear in the communities. And this shroud of, oh yeah, everything is fine. And if you act up, like it's going to be, it's going to be hell on earth. When in reality, it's already hell on earth. And they're just trying to cover it up with the Band-Aid.
Mhm.
And that line of thinking and the demoralization that the politicians express towards any kind of activists and calling everyone terrorists, that goes all the way back to like McCarthyism with the first Red Scare shit, and their blacklisting of anybody who they suspected of being communist, the whole 9 yards, just to try to convince the public that, oh, anybody speaking up for your human rights is now against society itself, when really it's these people who are speaking up for society. But it went a long way with that mind fuck of the public and convincing people that oh, it's you versus this other group of working class people, instead of everyone uniting against our actual enemy of the system and the government itself that's doing the oppressing. And like Comrade Andy just said, like that was effective in convincing certain people in the working class to turn against even their own children. That is fucking abhorrent, that they told their own kids that they wished that the fucking pigs would have killed more of them. That's horrible. That's unacceptable.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
Comrade,
it's crazy. Oh, sorry.
oh,
I was gonna say it's crazy how the biggest power move they have is to destroy the family unit. And if you could turn your family against each other, then it's easy peasy from there.
Mhm.
yep, speaks volumes to even what we were discussing before we started today's reading of the way the society functions, having disconnected us from our own families, from other people in society, from nature itself, the whole fucking 9 yards. Comrade Shay, I saw you throw your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, as a young lord, going back to the 60s and 70s, where I was incarcerated, there was numerous occasions where we fought against injustices within our within our prison. Every time something happened, we felt that it was wrong. We stood up in the yard and we talked about it to other people, and the administration always was able to single out the leaders and put them in and put them in segregation like myself and get beat up, get watered down, host, you know, be denied food for a day or two, you know, no showers, of course. Attica's only once a week. You took a shower. And so, you know, anytime that we as a people stand up and talk about the injustices that occur, the system is always going to find ways to divide us and suppress us and squash us, just like they did to the Black Panthers. You know, I mean, Black Panthers were the vanguards, of the struggle, and they stood up for various issues on various issues. And look what happened. They got gunned down. They got killed. You know, there was no need for Fred Hampton to get killed like he got killed. There was no need for that. The man was sleeping, but yet there was an agent in this. There was an agent close to him, and the agent, according to rumors, put some type of drug in his drink or something like that, and that's how they were able to kill Fred Hampton, just like they killed a lot of other Panthers, and they killed a few young laws themselves. Also, we had a few people that we lost as a result of getting shot and getting killed. So that's the situation with the system. It has always, anytime that you talk on behalf of good things for the people, they have a tendency of just locking you up or doing whatever they need to do.
Right. Aim to destabilize any kind of activist movement by any way that they can, whether it be the flat out murders there, or even like going back to the first section we read today with that question of whether Luciano had actually, been intentionally drugged as part of a COINTELPRO thing. That was quite common at the time. I've seen FOIA records that got released about the CIA using things like LSD and PCP to literally drug people in the public, and especially activists, for one, as an experiment to see what would happen, and for two, to cause that kind of destabilization. And that had a huge impact. Comrade Joe, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, a couple of the things that stood out to me in this book reading this evening, or this chapter we read, was pretty powerful. One is, and of course, we got to take back to the time we're talking, late 1969, early 1970, or up until, and I can't wait till they say August 10th, 1970, because that's my birthday when I was born. But we're almost there. Maybe the next chapter will bring it up. But what they were talking about in those time periods, and one of the things they brought out was that machismo, on how they honored machismoism, but towards the community, not towards a woman, or being proud as a man in your neighborhood. And then another thing that they brought out was that doesn't mean to beat your wife. There's nothing macho about beating your wife or beating your kids or anything like that, or even being a bully in the neighborhood. Another thing that I really liked, when they started going internationally, I think they called it, I had the word right now but I said it, but where they started going to Puerto Rico, and a third world country, like revolutionary strength. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now today, because and then like Comrade Andy mentioned, the people that have suffered in the Appalachian Mountains and stuff like that. But in other countries are really standing up in an awakening of all the injustices that have been done to so many. Because they mentioned when the United States try to hit war with Dominican Republic, where Comrade Chez at. Forgot exactly what year. I don't know if it was 65 or 53 or something like that. And other countries.
65.
65. Oh, okay. And then so we've been seeing that. I mean, that's already their game and stuff like that. But I wanted to see what was the feedback. And then on the one comrade brother that was a leader and a good speaker that kind of got punished and then kind of got fizzled out of the movement, that was so powerful. But I think he was like too machismo. Is that what I gathered from that reading, or did I miss something? If anybody
Yes,
can enlighten.
yes, that's what happened. Let me
Yeah.
elaborate on that real
Oh,
quick.
okay, yeah. That's what I want to. Thank you.
It's, go ahead.
No, brother. That's what I wanted to ask. I want to hear exactly what you have to say.
Yeah, Felipe, when he became chairman, he went on a trip. You know, it went to his fucking head that he was the chairman. You know, and he was a macho man. There's no doubt about that. You know, he displayed that in various ways. You know, especially when he was amongst the sisters. I wasn't in the young laws in the streets, but I know brothers, man, who came out of Attica and went to the young laws, and they told me when I came home, you know, how he was. You know, he also once he was put out, he went on another trip. He participated in the film Fort Apache, if anybody ever heard of that. You know, and that depicted Puerto Ricans as as criminals, you know, drug addicts, the females, prostitutes, etc. And he played in that kind of picture. Now, what kind of person do you think that person would be if, you know, you know, I mean, not to badmouth him, you know, but I know Felipe, you know, and he was on a trip. Once he left the organization, he had to leave the organization because he always displayed his machismo, you know, amongst the sisters, and a lot of sisters didn't go with that, you know, and so he had to go. Unfortunately, he had to go.
Yeah, that's kind of what they stated in the book. Like, you become an actor instead of like an activist. You become an actor, or you're playing the part,
Yeah,
like doing it for the applause and not the cause. Like, you know, and I think that could be prevalent in today's times, where we got to always, whatever we do, we got to do it from the heart. We got to do it because it's
yeah,
right, it's needed, not because it's a thing, a form of recognition. Because you go out there and feed homeless people, or you go out there and stand up against police brutality. Um, that's all fine and huckleberry, but don't do it for the applause. Do it for the cause. And I
exactly,
guess
exactly.
that's what you're relating to, because I think that's what I got off of that reading. Like, he was being more of an actor, or like, hey, look at me, what I'm doing, instead of, hey, like, let's just do stuff undercover, and like, let's make shit happen. We don't have to be out there in the press. That's all.
See, one thing that blew me away was I never knew he was married to Edith Morales, because I know Edith Morales too. You know, I never knew that they were married. That they were married. You know, but I'll
Well,
find that out too. I'm gonna
that was
find that
another
out
thing that
too.
was powerful too, is that he was married to a very influential sister, right? That had a lot of strength,
Yeah,
and was doing
definitely.
a lot of things. And for him
Exactly.
to come across that way, like, I don't know, but anyway, that's what I got. But I liked what they were doing, like going to Puerto Rico, and then having the understanding of blacks and Puerto Ricans working together in that specific period of time, which works now. I'm not saying that, but that was kind of unheard of, or even nowadays, for Chicanos and blacks to be working together. That was unheard of back in the days. I mean, it's almost against prison politics to this day.
Yeah.
That they still keep us separated. But fortunately, I don't have that mentality. And that's
Well, you know, going back to getting back to the Puerto Rican issue, you know, like going to Puerto Rico, I personally feel that that was a big mistake. Why it was a big mistake? Because a lot of young laws that went to Puerto Rico couldn't speak Spanish. See, that's what the book doesn't tell you. They couldn't speak Spanish. They couldn't relate. You know, I mean, the culture in Puerto Rico and the Puerto Ricans that are born and raised here, it's a conflict there somewhere. You know, it's not. It doesn't touch a base. You know, I mean, it's a good thing that they went to Puerto Rico with good intentions. But if you can't speak the lingo, you know, that's like going. That's like me, you know, going to France. You know, I don't speak French, but yet I'm going to go. How am I going to relate to those people? You know, and that's what happened in Puerto Rico. You know, when they went to Puerto Rico, was their downfall. Eventually became a downfall.
yeah, I can understand that concept of thinking because that's even happened with us Chicanos, because not all Chicanos speak Spanish. So, like, how are we going to relate when it comes to talking to Mexican people? I think that's why it's important
Now,
to know more than one language. I mean, I'm kind of gifted for that.
Exactly. If they would have sent Puerto Ricans that spoke good English, good Spanish to Puerto
Yeah.
Rico, then that would have been a good thing because they would have developed that mechanism and they will be able to relate to people, you know, because the bottom line is serving the people. That's the bottom line. But you can't serve it if you don't speak Spanish, you know, and that was one of their downfalls.
It would have been helpful if, like, you know, how earlier in the book, how they were referring to some of these people who, as kids, were first generation immigrants who served as translators for their parents, say, going to the doctor, etc. It would have been helpful if they had grabbed a few of those comrades who were bilingual and been like, hey, come with us on this trip to be able to translate and help us be able to connect with the community there. You know, that would have been one of my first thoughts if I was them, to make sure that there was somebody they're able to interpret. Comrade Andy, I see you got your hand up.
Well, yeah, one of the things I wanted to bring up is I have a friend. I think I might have mentioned before. He and I counsel a lot. He's been sick lately, but he's an old Chicagoan from the Puerto Rican community, and he was involved in everything here back in the day. And because he's a Black Puerto Rican, he was a liaison between the Black Panthers and some of the gangs in Chicago. He was a liaison between the Young Lords and the Keystone Nation, which is a big, shall we say, street organization in Chicago. And he would negotiate like safe passage for people, you know, or groups of people to go from one area where they were to another area where they had to cross, you know, other people's turf. So he played a big important role here, and he was close to the Young Lords, and he was involved with that. So he told me a lot about how they set him up because he was in prison from a real young age. He went to juvie and all that stuff. But they come at you from every direction. See, they don't just, they're opportunists. So that when the state starts coming at you, they screw up your car. They cause problems for your kid, or they accuse you of infidelity with somebody. They plant rumors on you in the community. With him, the police, the Chicago police, put a mountain of cocaine in front of him and said, dude, all you got to do is sell a little bit of this and you can give some to your people and you can make money for your people and you can do this and that. And we keep you in constant supply. This was not, some Latin kings that were talking to him. It was the Chicago Police Department. And he refused, and he said they can never touch me. They can't get me because I don't mess with little kids. I don't mess outside my marriage. I don't smoke dope. I don't snort dope. I don't shoot dope. And he's very, you call him old school machismo, but he's a principled man. See, that's the most important thing. A lot of the people that we idolize and turn into heroes, we got to be careful about that because they're not always principled people. This guy raised his family and bought a house in Chicago and did just many degrees live by the book, but he was arrested in his 80s because of his refusal to back off when the police came to accuse somebody in the neighborhood. I mean, he's like a real rock in terms of being a principled man. Now, what I'm saying to you is, right now they're starting to throw everything at the Second Rainbow Coalition. The stuff that they're doing in Newark, New Jersey, to the New African Black Panther Party, and to attempt to stitch up, Comrade Captain Africa in a humbug thing, and really to endanger him and his whole family, is what we have to prepare for. We can't go into this naively thinking that, it's going to be different because we're different or we're smarter or this or that. They need to divide us, and they will use absolutely every little thing that you do to try to do that. So the collectivity that we form, even on a Zoom call, is of extreme importance. I mean, I feel closer to you all than people that I've known for 50 years, simply because you represent to me principled revolutionaries, where these others have gone off on some other trip that I don't care about. And you could say they're dead to me. But what we're doing here is building unity, understanding, and it's vital. I mean, this book gives us a real firm basis to understand the threats that we're coming under, not that happened in the past, but what are actually coming today.
Very good. I like that, Andy.
Yeah, me too. That's what's up.
I like that the examples you just laid out clearly show that contrast between, the harmful forms of machismo versus the healthy ones. What has in recent years been termed either healthy masculinity or toxic masculinity. It's how you use it. It's what you do within your life, your family, your community, the whole nine yards. Of you're either going to embrace the really healthy aspects of that or the harmful ones. And it speaks volumes about your character.
Yeah.
The floor is open if anybody else has any thoughts about either this commentary or anything else in the reading.
We have Sean and Yesenia that joined in a little late. If they would like to jump in there and say a little something, that'd be nice. If not, any one of us.
I've been listening to you guys and, dealing with dog stuff, but, it is nice to actually hear that, some of our heroes of yesteryear and we're actually good people, you know, considering all the rumor mills, CIA, NSA, any other alphabet soup, have heaped on their name. History really shows, that ain't the truth. And that's all I gotta say.
Mhm.
I would just like to add that it's crazy how anything that we do for just being human, if we screw up, which is of course we're gonna do, can be used against us. Like I am a recovering alcoholic and I've been hospitalized multiple times. And so I don't know what's gonna happen if I ever get detained or taken in or anything like that, or if they're gonna use it against me. And like that's why I also am very hesitant in owning a gun. I do carry my knife and my pepper spray, and I have a taser as well. But if I get a gun and something happens, like it just, and like they do a whole story on me and they bring out my past, like it would make the Brown Berets or whatever organization I've been a part of look really bad. It's like, oh, this is one of their members, this is who they let in, like this is, they're allowing just people with mental health issues or whatever it is, however they want to label me, um, to have guns and do all this stuff and be terrorists or whatever. So that's why I don't at the moment. And it's just like I'm on the borderline. But I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
I got one thing that's like uh Comrade Chacha, Jose Chacha Jimenez. He fell off the rails, after the initial growth of the Young Lords, and then after this traumatic thing where they killed this preacher and his wife at the People's Church. Somebody murdered them, and they tried to accuse the Young Lords. Then they shot Fred Hampton. He fell into addiction, having been clean for a long time. He fell back into addiction, and he pulled himself out again. We can redeem ourselves constantly. It's only the ruling class that will condemn us forever. The working classes will always welcome you back, and hope and help your recovery. So I believe in that. I believe that we have to stand by all our warriors, even there's times when they can't be useful. We don't like my friends says there's a woman who used to be a young lord. She runs a church sanctuary, and she calls the people who come to get fed there, she calls them low life because they're drug addicts and stuff like that. And my friend said, she's got no business calling anybody low life. We're human beings. And he don't partake himself, but he said anybody who's having trouble, they might not be able to be useful or helpful or anything like that, but they're human beings. And so we treat people in all states of disrepair as human beings, and potential revolutionaries, if not, revolutionaries.
Right. It's one thing to keep in mind that when shit hits the fan like that, that's disheartening. It hurts our souls. And yeah, there's gonna be some comrades who self-medicate, whether it be with alcohol or with drugs. And what we absolutely should be doing there is to intervene in a healthy manner of, comrade, how can I help? Do you have shit you need to talk about and get off your fucking chest? These conversations are therapeutic. That's part of that camaraderie that we have together, is to be each other's support through that shit so we can come out of it better. Comrade Joe, I see you got your hand up too. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to share that we live in a dog world, and nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. And if we learn from our mistakes, then that's better, and kudos to you, or kudos to all of us. But if we continue making the same mistakes and not learn from them, then that shows a lack of not giving a flying fuck. In order to be revolutionaries, we have to respect one another and accept them for who they are, because nobody's perfect. Everybody has their own specific bag. Whether it's they eat too much, they smoke too much, they drink too much, or they like pot. I probably am guilty of about 2 of those things. But at the same time, anyone that's using drugs and hardcore drugs, we really have to be careful with. Because like the sister Yesenia said, as revolutionary leaders and people look up to us, we cannot drop the ball and let them judge the whole formation or all Brown Berets, all other organizations we work with by one person's actions. But we have to, we're definitely in the public's eye. So we definitely have to tread cautiously, choose everything that we do, every action that we make, sound-mindedly, and never get caught slipping, because we live in a dog world. And that's
Right.
all.
Right on.
This is very
Anyone
true.
else?
And it's pretty sad when it comes to cases like what Yesenia was referring to of you could be demonized for some shit in your past if you're just protecting your own life here and now, of, you know, defending yourself against an assault, that they'll try to frame that in some other kind of fucking manner of like, oh, well, this person is doing this because of this, that, or the other, instead of looking at, well, no, their life was being threatened and they literally had a need to defend themselves. And if they hadn't done so, they might not still be with us. It's sad and it's shameful. And that's something that we saw play out when we were reading the last book by Dennis Banks of, you know, people who were merely defending themselves against a direct assault by feds are now still sitting in prison. Like Brother Leonard Peltier, he's still in prison for something that, for one, he did not even do. He was just there. And for two, whoever did shoot those feds was doing so in self-defense. But because they had, you know, been demonized in the public eye for other forms of activism to protect themselves and their community, the feds are still holding him in prison. It's something that we definitely have to be mindful of, because the system will do anything in its fucking power and capacity to demonize us simply for protecting our own lives.
I have a book on my shelf that my sister picked up for me in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia last year. And I asked her to look for something, and she found this book. It's called The Good Terrorist. And it's the story of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. And it goes into minute detail about how they set it up, what they did, and the things that they did. I mean, it was all remarkable, and of course, it had huge implications across the globe. But the detail that it goes into includes, like, they kidnapped George Washington's nephew and some of his slaves, and they held them. But George Washington's nephew testified that they treated them remarkably well. You know, they were very gracious to them. But they were put them under the gun and said, "You're getting in this cart, and we're taking you away." They did things that scandalized the nation, you know, and almost everybody who had been given money to John Brown and supporting him suddenly never heard of him, didn't know him, didn't you know, who are you talking about? I mean, everybody abandoned him, and you know, and then they hung him. But the remarkable thing about it is, like, that act, you know, even though you could call it a terrorist act, was in defiance of the most brutal, horrific slavery that has ever been existed in the history of the world. I mean, that was the most god awful crap that ever went on, and he wasn't going to put up with it. So, you know, he consciously became a armed enemy of that system. And although I don't see how we outshoot some of these forces on the other side, I do see how we have outorganized them and eventually undermine their own military, take their own soldiers away from them, because the soldiers themselves will say, "We can't do this." That's what happened in Vietnam. It wasn't so much that the soldiers made a military offensive against the U.S. government. They just wouldn't fight, and they wouldn't participate, and they began to protest. And that became like an instability for the system. See, that's what they're already on shaky ground. But if they move against their own population that's hurting right now, then they're really in trouble. Then they're really in trouble. So strategically, the working class of the world is in a good position. So I hesitate to advocate for, like, anything that's like you know, could be conceived of as like radical lefty shoot 'em ups or something like that. I don't see. I think it's like, really, that's what you got. You know, well, call me when you get an F-16. That's what I told one guy, because I don't want to see your little popsicle gun. Um, but we are on the verge of a huge social transformation, which can be led by revolutionary ideas. That's John Brown wasn't successful because his ideas were wrong. It was just the time that they could be successful in. It was not historically the time, but that led to the Civil War, which did end chattel slavery, at least, you know, as it had previously existed. So history does move, and we're a part of that.
Right. That's a good example there to be able to highlight the difference between what was a feasible form of activism then versus now, simply because of the massive difference in technology and weaponry. Because in John Brown's day, he was on an even playing field with the people he was going up against, of his gun versus their guns, to
Yes.
be able to be a liberator and go free slaves from their
Yeah.
slave owners, you know. And like you said, today we don't have M16s, we don't have fighter jets, we don't have fucking tanks.
No
We've got to use a
drones.
different strategy.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like Stonewall Jackson didn't have no drones to deal with. You know, it's like
Right.
we're limited.
Right. Like, they weren't able to use AI facial recognition technology to hunt people down in a fucking crowd. We're
Right.
dealing with a
Right.
whole different playing field today
That's right.
than the
Yeah.
activists then.
Yeah.
Hmm. Comrade Joe, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, this is some of the things I think about as a revolutionist in today's times. We have to realize that we are martyrs. When we're going to be fighting against colonialism, when we're going to be fighting against the safety of so many masses of oppressed peoples, we are going to, and then the stronger we get and the more educated we get, the more active we get, the bigger target we're going to be. So we have to go into it wholeheartedly, knowing that the outcome could be imprisonment.
Right.
Like,
Or death.
fuck. That's so. I mean, so we have to go into it like that. And what we're doing isn't for everyone. And this is what I think too in the movement. We have to have our dog soldiers, our front people that have less to, I would say, less to lose in life, type of thing, versus somebody that's a young father with 5 kids. We don't want to put them in the front. Don't put the one with young 5 kids in the front line. Have people stand up as dog soldiers in the front, because we all have a purpose. We all have something to offer, but not everybody is willing to get in this doggy dog world and this doggy dog struggle, because they have more to lose. I mean, so when we say, oh, we're revolutionists, how far are we willing to take it? Are we willing to do 5, 10, 15, 20? I think when it gets down to the nitty gritty, there's going to have to be some of us to step up. And that's all.
It also speaks to the change in strategy that we've been able to learn from the original Panthers of focusing first on the Serve the People programs, because in the conditions that we're currently dealing with of having limited access to food, healthcare, things along those lines that are actual necessities for life that have been commodified. One of the most revolutionary things you can fucking do is grow your own food and, build community gardens with your neighbors to to feed the whole neighborhood. Things like that, to start building our own networks where, we can have nurses and doctors who are revolutionary minded be able to do like the Young Lords did and go door to door and pay house visits to people and help them get their health together. Things like this. These actually directly address the material conditions that we have a problem with being commodified in today's society. And to be able to build those safety nets first is fundamental to any revolutionary movement today, because those are the things that the masses across the board would lose access to from the system itself. And that's part of why they demonize us for those things too, because they're like, how dare you not want to be dependent on our bullshit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say only one thing that has to go along with education, and that's one of the successes that I can see going forward. The Young Lords are doing it here in Chicago, and Brown Berets are doing it out west and in Chicago, and especially with the Panthers, both in Newark and here in Indiana, that they're building the garden and they're feeding the people and they're bringing the book bags and they're bringing the haircuts and they're bringing the this and they're bringing the that, but they're also bringing political education, see? And that makes all the difference in the world. That when you look at the growth of a real revolutionary movement, no matter where it is in the world, those two things go hand in hand. And that otherwise you're just engaged in some charitable activities, not necessarily revolutionary activities. But I think that, speaking to Joe's point, I think that the the people want very badly to be a part of the revolution. You know, I mean, they may not express it directly in terms of Marxism, Leninism, but the people want and need a revolution. They sense that. And what we have to do is connect those dots while we're handing out a sandwich. You know, we could all be eating really well if we controlled, food production. You ever think about that? And talk to people about that kind of thing. It can work. We can find all the food and all the people that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was very fortunate to be part of Denver Urban Community Gardens. And no matter where we're at, we could be in the grocery line at the store and bring up a subject and make revolutionary activists out on the grocery line. But I got to do it in the community gardens, and it was so nice. There was different ethnic groups, different age groups that were involved with community gardening, and the foresight of like, we need to stand up and do something. So that's like just another opportunity to bring more collective people together, and not just community gardening, but all self-sustainability. Because you can get people that are into windmills, you can get people that are into hydro electric, or if you have a creek or a river next to you, or you can get people into solar energy. Oh, I was just going to show you the birds passing by. Sorry for all the noise. They say birds of a feather flock together. As long as they're not liberals. That's not the bird I want to be a part of. But self-sustainability is the key, because the less we have to rely on the way things are, the easier it is going to be for us to make radical change. The more you rely on, like sister made her own coffee. People rely on Starbucks. Look at that. They spend $5-6 in the morning. They probably spend $5 or $6 at lunch. Hell, they might even get another $5 or $6 one on the way home from work. $20 in coffee, when you could easily make that yourself. $20 could probably last you a week in coffee making.
More than that.
One example. Okay,
I spend like $5 to $6 a jar for my coffee, and each one of those lasts me a couple of weeks. So
yeah. So that we could do that. We could do that in all aspects of life,
Right.
Because everything's like, almost like, to me, it's like supply and demand. The more the demand for it, the more they jack up the prices.
Yeah.
The whole COVID shit, like, oh man, look at, they jacked up the prices on everything since then.
Yeah.
And then they made a scare out of it and cleared the shelves. You couldn't even get toilet paper. For shit's sake. That was like bullshit. You know what I mean? And then I'm not like with those doomers, like, well, I'm gonna prepare for doom. No, I'm not preparing for doom. I'm preparing for what I can do now, today. Like what is important today to survive today, into tomorrow, into next week, next month, next year, hopefully. Because we're never promised a day. But what can we do for today? Especially when we don't look at it just as ourselves, but what can we do today for society? So many good points that I learned from y'all, and so many good points that we can use to motivate other individuals to think like-minded. So thank you all. Always thank you. That's all.
Appreciate it.
To bring those thoughts full circle back to what you were pointing out a few minutes ago, Joe. Even things like this, of building these community support networks, also puts that target on our backs, whether it be for arrest or for murder. And look at what the fuck they did to Chairman Fred. The reason why they went after him so hard and they were like freaking out, going, oh my God, a black messiah is rising, because he was building those programs to feed the people and to provide education, political education at the same time. And that's what they saw as a huge threat. And we're like, oh fuck, we got to take him out at any cost. And then built their own program to counter it, of like, okay, we'll start feeding kids in school and doing, you know, breakfast at the beginning of the school day to get the kids doing that here instead of over there where they're getting a proper political education before coming here to the school of indoctrination for the day. Things like that, the system saw as a huge fucking threat, not just the self-sustainability, but the freaking out they did over, oh my God, you're learning real history that hasn't been whitewashed into American exceptionalism bullshit. You can't be opening people's minds and not put a fucking target on your back.
Yeah, you watch some of these documentaries and you see the people filmed the aftermath of when the cops raided some of these places. The first thing they did was smash all the breakfast for children things. They threw the Cheerios all over the place, dumped the milk out on the floor, just trashed the breakfast for children plate. Though if that doesn't give you a clear picture of how vicious this system is, I don't know what will. I mean, it's beyond words. I mean, there's no reason why anybody in their right mind would have any loyalty to such a system, you know, backed up by that kind of thing. But people think it's going to get better, but that's probably not true.
Well, it can, but it's definitely going to get worse before it gets better, because there's a lot of shit we're going to have to contend with in this process to be able to end the way shit is being run now, in order to rebuild it how it should be run, where we are actually living as a community again.
Yeah.
Like, individualism has been pushed so fucking hard by capitalism that it's literally, you know, conditioned people to being sociopathic, literally against each other, of I'm out to get mine, and you know, fuck if anybody else does, and this pull yourself up from your bootstraps mentality that the phrase itself was initially coined as straight up fucking facetious fucking thought of sarcasm, of like, it's literally fucking impossible to pull yourself up from your bootstraps. That's not how fucking gravity works. And it was meant to mock the idea that, you know, that's even possible to do. And instead, people latched onto it as if that was something legitimate, because the point went right over their fucking heads. And it's driven people further and further into this individualist way of living and not giving a fuck about the person next to them. And it's fucked. We need to end that. This is why we need cultural revolution too, to remind people of how we actually exist, how humans have existed on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years, versus this bullshit of the last 500 that they want to claim as fucking human nature. No, it's not. It's exploitation. If it was human nature, then capitalist exploitation would have been the fucking framework of society for the last couple 100,000 years, not be a new thing that happened in the last 500, going hand in hand with racism and, you know, this classism of motherfuckers wanting to just exploit whoever the fuck they can for their own benefit and not give a fuck how it impacts those individuals or their community. There's got to be balance there of, you know, like we were discussing before we started today, of, you know, libertarian socialism, being, what Marx initially coined to describe that balance between your self-determination and your obligation to your community to care for each other. Comrade Joe?
Yeah, I like the way you mentioned that, comrade sister. It should be more communalism than individualism, because we all know that the individual is only looking out for himself. He don't give a rat's ass about anyone else. And society, sorry to say, has bred a lot of individualism. And like I say, California is like the me state. It's all about me, me, me. Not to down talk California, because I'm percent of me is Californian or from California, but that was prior to all this bullshit of being taken over by the Spaniards and then by the United Snakes. But I think to myself, I always say, don't everything to you. You're like, even our whole lives are already kind of predestined. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But what are we going to do? What mark are we going to leave while we're here on Earth? I think that's the most important thing. And being an individualism type of person, that's very selfish. And I think you can get a lot farther with the kind words and a big stick, yes. But what's sad is we're all like crabs in a bucket. The minute one is trying to rise and get out of the bucket, someone will pull them down. And it sucks because it keeps on going and ongoing like a revolving circle that never ends. But this is what if we unite the masses, we unite like-minded individuals into having the same thought process, sharing one another's thoughts, keeping an open mind to always learning something new. I think that's going to be our key strategy because, of course, like I said, learning is the education part. I'm still in the educational part of the whole revolutionary system, but I know my heart's there. So I think we have to weigh it out too. It's got to be in the mind, but it's also got to be in the heart, because whatever we do from the heart, and that's all. And I see Yessie and Sean have made a couple of comments. Feel free to step in, comrades, if you like, please. Thank you. I'm not trying to put you all on blast, but if you would like to make a comment, feel free.
Right. No pressure, just invitation. I just opened up the chat window to see the comments. Yeah, Sean points out modern day analog is them ticketing and arresting Food Not Bombs folks. And Andy replied that Food Not Bombs is truly heroic. Agreed. I've got friends back in Flint who do Food Not Bombs, and through their efforts, they've managed to team up with other parts of the community to fully fund an entire urban farm that takes up multiple blocks. And what they do there, they sell a little bit of it to local restaurants to help keep some funding coming back into the farm to buy new seed, to build more greenhouses, etc. And at the end of every week, everything else they're giving away. They set up a stand at one of the local churches that is part of their network that helps do the funding, and invite the entire community to come grab whatever you need. There's, a lineup of tables set up with every form of fresh produce that they're growing at the farm to come grab what you need. They've even expanded now to have orchard grounds right there in the heart of the east side of Flint, where, if you've got the means to get over there, you can grab whatever you need. if you don't, somebody will make arrangements, usually, you know, like some of the folks at the church who volunteer. Sometimes they'll, you know, bring food out to people. They even do stuff like going around and mowing lawns on abandoned properties, just so that it's not getting overgrown, becoming, you know, a dangerous area. They also push for things like abandoned houses that are in complete disrepair and not being able to be fixed, for the city to finally come out and tear those down so that it's not a risk of injury to kids in the neighborhood. Because, you know, kids will wander in there like, oh, play zone. You know, I myself have had to yell at some of my neighbors' kids when I still lived there, like, get the fuck out of there. Get out of there. The building's collapsing. That's not a place to play. You know, so it's important, like, all of these things come together because of these people who are like-minded and revolutionary, going, you know what, no, we're going to address these specific material conditions that are at play in our neighborhood and resolve it together. And they are straight up fucking heroes.
Yeah. One of the things about Flint, and I know people like who live there and stuff like that, and who've been struggling with this situation for a long time. But the thing about the good thing that Michael Moore did by making these movies, he showed that this was a metaphor or an example, a microcosm of the whole country. The whole infrastructure is going to hell. The government is abandoning the people. Look what's happening. But his solution was ultimately vote Democrat. Now, see, that's the difference, is that now, as the situation in the infrastructure and the food chain and all these supply chains, as that gets worse, we're saying the solution is a revolution whereby the people take control of the means of production and produce the food that's needed, and don't throw any food in a landfill, and don't throw any useful items in a landfill. And we, in other words, the revolutionary forces become the shot callers in society, not the people who are begging, not the people who are, you know, just hoping or wishing and hoping. No, we're going to run shit. That's the idea. And Michael Moore never really wanted to go that far. He's, you know, and so he's uh he's a multimillionaire. He's always been attacked by the right, but he's never united with the revolution. He never united with the revolutionary forces in Flint or anywhere else. He's always kept himself at arm's length and always told the people, vote Biden. I was like, are you fucking kidding me after all this? No. So we're actually challenging the leadership that's been in place for the last at least 70 or 80 years, ever since Roosevelt Coalition. All that old leadership of the Democratic Party and the Civil Rights Movement is no longer adequate.
True. Yeah. And specifically with Michael Moore, there's a lot going on there. Like, yes, there's been some good facets of his films opening people's eyes to the bullshit, but also what you pointed out there, that negative influence of just, you know, vote harder and that'll fix it. No, it won't fucking fix it, because a lot of the Democrats are just as, you know, corrupt as any Republican. When it comes to the politicians, I'd say all of them. You know, whereas a lot of the masses who just vote Democrat are just, they haven't been educated on enough of what's going on politically to be aware of these issues, and oftentimes don't have the fucking time because they're too busy in the capitalist rat race trying to make it to work, feed their families, keep up on even shit around the house to be able to have that time. So, you know, it's up to us to awaken them, to you know, show them, wait a minute, you're voting against your own better good when you could be doing other things in your community to actually help resolve these issues. But going back to Michael Moore, even when he got his start with that first film about GM,
right,
his lack of ethics was showing there from the jump. A lot of the research materials that he used for that, he actually stole from Michael Westfall, who was a UAW writer for many years, probably is still active with that. He wrote for the UAW paper for many years. He worked the line and was an actual activist. And he's the one who, you know, proposed working on this with Michael Moore, because he knew that Michael Moore was wanting to get into, you know, creating documentaries. And next thing you know, all his stacks of research were stolen by Michael Moore. So there's some lack
Wow.
of ethics there that went on that a lot of people aren't aware of. I wasn't even aware of until a mutual friend who also worked in the shop put me in touch with Michael Westfall, and I interviewed him and, you know, found out a lot of these things. But there's a lot there that, you know, to be able to see the whole picture and go, yeah, question everything needs to be brought to the table when it comes to Michael Moore and what incentivized him. Because, you know, it's one of those things that's really disheartening for those of us who are from Flint to go, wait a minute, this guy from the suburb of Davison has made millions off of doing documentary films about the city of Flint. Well, where's the money being put back into the community? You know,
Yeah,
investing in the
yeah.
fucking Capitol Theater doesn't cut it. Why isn't he putting any of those millions back into actual community programs? So I'll call him right the fuck out on that right now. You know, it's a problem that he used that for his own personal gain and isn't actually helping the community like he should be and could be with all the money he's made off of featuring our stories. And Sean, I'd seen you had popped your hand up for a minute, and I see you're sharing some good stuff here in the chat. Would you like to take the mic for a moment and you know, dispel some knowledge upon us with this?
Let me get on my soapbox.
Go for it.
So, you know, I mean, hearing about not bombs and the end rebellion, you know, climate activists and all of this, starting more locally at home. I've been impressed with a few ravers in my community who have started things like Dance Safe and Safer Raving by Amy, and they show up with test kits and, you know, basically trip sitters for anybody who might not be having a good time because they didn't test their shit. You know, as a form of harm reduction in communities, but, you know, like maybe even expanding that to more, because, you know, people are going to get their hands on whatever they're going to get their hands on, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. You know, I've been following the research in Portugal and Spain and a few other places where they have completely legalized, you know, drugs, hardcore, softcore, whatever. I mean, I don't know what the soft version of that is, but
Probably weed and mushrooms.
yeah. Legalizing that sort of stuff and making, you know, it less of a criminal activity as more of a sociological issue that can be treated and supervised medically rather than you know, people dying off in the gutter because their shit's cut with fentanyl and they didn't know and don't know to test their shit with a $50 kit that's good for like at least 30 fucking doses of whatever the hell you're getting. You know, that sort of thing. And then the stuff that I was dropping in chat, one is a poem called Letting the Cat Out of the Bag. Some of you older gente may be familiar with this. What did you tell that man just now? I told him to hurry. What right did you have to tell him to hurry? I pay him to hurry. How much do you pay him? $4 a day. Where do you get the money? I sell the products. Who makes the products? He does. How many products does he make in a day? $10 worth. Then instead of you paying him, he pays you $6 a day to stand around and tell him to hurry. Well, but I own the machines. How did you get the machines? Sold the products and bought them. Who made the products? Shut up, he might hear you. From a United Automobile worker in October 1937. So,
Ah,
yeah,
good. That's good. That's good.
stuff I find floating around on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Social media can be a tool of immense change and like informational gathering, even though I watched during the Black Lives Matter movement them clamping down on just about anybody who was speaking truth about, what's really going on, as opposed to, what the media was selling to everybody, that whole cities were on fire and there's complete lawlessness and got to restore democracy, at the end of a barrel. Nah, you're talking about like 3 blocks in a city that's literally about like 120 blocks or whatever, um, watching people in the CHOP area in Seattle, um, Chapel Hill Autonomous something or another. Um, there were a few names for it, and like just watching Minneapolis just go off. I followed as many people who were posting just from the personal street levels. And sharing their content so people could actually really get a better idea. And I wound up getting banned about 4 times. One of them was for about 3 months after the fact. Um, and it was just exhausting to try to keep up with all by myself. Because nobody else I knew was posting anything like that. And I'm like, but are you guys all watching the news? Because that's not what the folks on the ground are saying.
Yeah, that's going to be increasingly important that we be able to have our own reliable sources. I mean, it just made me think when you were saying that, what they get doing all this UFO invasion stuff. What if they did like in 1937? They did do, I think it was 37. They did this War of the Worlds broadcast that freaked everybody right the fuck out. It's almost like they're setting us up for another one of those.
Oh yeah.
We're all going. We don't know what to believe, but goddamn, there's Martian invaders out there. So I mean, they
I
are
mean, they kind of
masters. They're
did do
masters.
that with 2001,
Yeah,
September 11th.
they did. They did indeed. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's heavy. We gotta have reliable stuff that we can trust. Guess we have to do that too. We have to grow gardens and fix our teeth and do all that shit at once. Yeah, I guess so.
Sorry about that. Come on.
Okay.
Well, my phone's about to cut out, and I've got to hit the hay. So, uh, just bless all y'all. I love hanging and having these conversations, and you tolerating me. That's something Shay and I have in common. We like being tolerated by young people.
We absolutely love you guys and your insight and your wisdom and your presence here. So thank you.
All right. Good night, y'all. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
My battery's dying too, but I can get back on a charger here soon. I was wondering if I should read the 4 black block texts that I posted. A lot of this is, that's in these posts reminds me of the stuff we talk about, like tit for tat.
If you want to, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
We can still rock it out for a few minutes.
Everyone who insists on asking me what's the alternative, because I do see people having this discourse today. You'll find it in chat threads on various pages, usually a leftist page, and it's some right-wing troll trying to get an aha gotcha. Never really works out for them though. Anyways, everyone who insists on asking me what's the alternative does not want my answer because it is uncomfortable and requires far more than many, if not most of you are willing to sacrifice. There is no easy one-size-fits-all answer that can be explained in 280 characters. I'm assuming it's former Twitter. We are too comfortable. All of us are. You want Joe Biden to be the savior, which is why you're positioning him as such, because it absolves you from actually doing anything or giving up something materially. This was posted back in 2020. Say it, admit it. Joe Biden is not going to do shit because he doesn't have to do shit. He didn't earn anybody votes, yet millions are going to vote for him, irrespective of his lack of progressive policies. And we're going to let him get away with it because on the surface, he's not Trump. It's political violence, constant political violence. Everyone wants an out from the violent approach to addressing the actualities of our material reality without realizing people are already dying every day. We're all inches away from dying. You want easy, quick solutions, and there are none to fascism. The alternative to fascism is scientific socialism or communism or a healthy mix of some, both. A little anarchism sprinkled in, whatever. It's taking money out of your paycheck every month and giving it to radical mutual aid funds, feeding, clothing, helping house people. It's going outside and physically demanding politicians provide housing and health care for all houseless people, and throwing slushies in their face if and when they say no, and refusing to leave their office or homes. A little anecdote about that later, and refusing to allow them to leave until they change their minds. It's putting pressure on CEOs of food service corporations to give away the food they waste and throw away every day to people in need of it for free. It's putting our bodies on the line to stop war and deportation machine. Fuck ice. It's training ourselves and dedicating our lives to community. If not from COVID, then the lack of healthcare. If not lack of healthcare, then from poverty, houselessness. It's imperialist sanctions / war. We're already in the midst of class war, the most violent kind. But the only ones who realize we are in the war are the ones who are waging it. While we sit here and debate capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist, serial rapists, fascists should best, quote unquote, lead us, laugh my ass off. I fucking hate it here. Goodbye. They bring up some really good points with all of that, and not necessarily. I'm not exactly sure who wrote this particularly because it's one of them things that just floats out there. But I mean, their handle is queer socialism, so I assume they've read some theory. And that's all.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, like, I see that their other part of their handle is read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and it's like, yes, yes. Matter of fact, that's one that we should discuss adding to our reading list.
Well, there you go.
Right? But yeah, they're highlighting a lot of the core issues that we are dealing with right now, and especially that part of, like, going back to, why the fuck do people keep supporting Biden? It's like this is not anybody with real
Sustainable.
progressive ideology never has been. I mean, for fucking years, he has been a Republican in Democrats' clothing. But this just speaks volumes to one of those things we try to educate people on, that Democrats and Republicans are two wings of the same bird. They're barely a hair apart in ideology. And that only separation point is that Republicans will tell you the fucked up shit they're going to do and pretend that it's a good thing. Whereas the Democrats will lie to you and pander and, you know, fucking try to pretend like they are supporting you by waving a rainbow flag while throwing on kente cloth and taking a knee, pretending to be standing with people against brutality, while they turn around and do the same fucking shit that the Republicans do, and, you know, throw billions more in funding at the pigs that are doing all of this murdering in the streets. So there's really no difference. It's like loud fascism or quiet fascism. Woo, big fucking difference. And, you know, a lot of it comes back to that American exceptionalism bullshit and straight up lies when it comes to what we get indoctrinated with and conditioned to as far as politics, and them pretending as if these two are the right wing and the left wing when neither of them are left. Right versus left is a fucking economic stance. If you are capitalist, you are right wing, period. Period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Being a leftist begins with being anti-capitalist. So even if somebody is a democratic socialist like Bernie, guess what? Still right wing, because everything that, you know, he and his ilk propose comes down to just throwing in some social safety nets that are dependent on capitalist exploitation still. They're still capitalist. They're still right wing. You don't begin to, you know, actually sit on the left side of that spectrum until you are a straight up socialist or a communist or the left leaning anarchists.
I was
And-
going to say, even though this post was written in 2020, not a damn thing has changed.
Other than it getting worse.
Well, yeah, that.
I mean, if I remember right, there's a 59% jump in poverty from either 21 to 22 or 22 to this year. That's enormous. And it's coming at the same time as enormous jumps in corporate profit margins. Gee, wonder what the fucking cause is. Go ahead, Comrade Joe.
Yeah, and thank you, Comrade Sean, for and reading those two different. But I was gonna say, like they always say, well, pick the best out of the two worst. What doesn't change that the two are already worse. And it's sad. It's sad because the choices, and I don't vote. And if I did, I would vote for the Partido de la Razón Unida party as soon as we get somebody in the House. But it's really, really sad that they leave the public to pick the worst of the two evils. They're like, okay, well, voting for Biden so you don't vote for Trump, that's going to make everything better. And like you said, and like we've seen, what has he really done? But forget everything he's talking about. It's kind of like a shit show. I don't really like to talk about politics because I don't know what to talk about them. But now this was in 2020. Now we're in 2024, and you said it's absolutely the same thing. It is the same thing all over again right now. Like people threw their hands up right now. Like I don't even know what to vote. I'm not going to vote because there ain't nobody worthy of voting for it. In my eyes, that I know of, in my lack of political education or bullshit or I don't know. So, and just stay away from K Fox News. That's all I gotta say.
Go ahead, Sean.
Oh,
Cookies are out.
I had some point before Joe started speaking, no offense. But I done forgot it. So I'm gonna pass the talking stick for a moment till somebody brings up another really good point where I'm like, ooh.
Right on. Well, a few thoughts on what Joe was saying. The fact of the matter is we really don't have any choice when it comes to electoral politics. Because before we even get to the voting booth, the system itself, the establishment, has already picked which puppets it's going to be okay with getting into those offices, because it already knows these are the ones who will abide by what the system wants, what the establishment wants, and will serve this corporatocracy, this autocracy, the bourgeoisie. And anybody who is running for other parties that are actually presenting genuinely leftist things that, like, okay, yes, there's some of the Green Party that are still in that DemSoc region, but there's some that are actual socialists. And you see what happened with, Dr. Jill Stein, that when she ran for president a few years back under the Green Party, she got fucking arrested for showing up to participate in debates. Why? Because the establishment didn't want anyone to hear her present an actual socialist platform. The establishment doesn't want anything outside of this lesser of two evils bullshit. It wants to handpick these fucking, puppet clowns that it knows will serve its purposes and cater to the bourgeoisie and tell you this is all you have to pick from. And it always comes down to the wealthy. Notice there isn't anybody getting into these offices unless they are already incredibly wealthy and part of the exploitative class. They are either bourgeoisie or petty bourgeoisie and have fuck tons of money to start funding their own campaigns and even to be able to pay for advertising to get other people to contribute and fund their campaigns. You're not going to see your average fucking Joe or Jane running for those offices because we don't have the fucking money for it. And yeah, I just saw your comment, Sean. AOC was a huge letdown. Yeah, she sure as fuck was, because she talked good game in her platform, but where has she held herself accountable to it? She hasn't. She got in and got fucking bought off and shut up and shut down because they didn't want her actually having any steam in her engine to implement any of those things that the people actually wanted and voted her in for. Yes, performative fucking politics. That's all it is. That's why I point out that Democrats are nothing but pandering sons of bitches, because they're just going to tell you what you want to hear and turn around and do the opposite behind your fucking back and then pretend like they were inhibited by the Republicans. Even when Democrats have a super majority, they're like, sorry, the best we can do is nothing. Get the fuck out of here. Joe, go ahead.
I was gonna share with y'all. I went to the swap meet yesterday, and usually when I go to the swap meet, I look for stuff that's culturally appropriate or revolutionary appropriate. Because I travel all the time, so I can't like buy nothing big. I can only buy something that can fit in my luggage. So this 90-year-old man, I was gonna buy this one pin. It says, "Don't fight back." I mean, don't give back, fight back. Let me see if y'all can see it.
Nice.
It's an old pin. I said I was going to buy it, and he says, "No, I'll give it to you." So, we were talking about earlier, like there's many opportunities to talk about, specifics, especially when you're building strength with other revolutionaries. So this 90-plus-year-old man says, "You know what? The thing would be is all those corporate companies that put money into those into politics, right? That they should limit corporate people or private individuals and what they donate for a campaign to the maximum of $100, so that way they won't owe no favors. Because of course, if some company is going to donate $2 million, well, then you're going to feel like you have to, you know, show some kind of productivity for those $2 million donation for your campaign. But if we kept the campaign as individuals or corporates to $100, that would equal out for, like, say, young radicals like ourselves taking office eventually one day. Because we wouldn't have to deal with somebody that got $20 million in campaign money or whatever the case may be. It would be more equaled. And I was like, this old man, I was like, I wish I had more time to talk to him. Maybe I'll go talk to him next weekend. Because I'm going to pull up a chair and sit down there and listen. I'll probably even record him. And he was an old white gentleman. And he says, I really love my brown and red skinned brothers and sisters. Like we were talking about radicalists earlier, like when it doesn't matter really the color of skin. Kind of like in the book, they were talking about, they worked with many Chicanos and other organizations and stuff like that. I think that's so beautiful. So like, I can't wait to talk to that man. But what is your guys' take on that? Because like I said, I'm not very politically educated, but like if they made a thing where you can only donate up to $100, it would make the playing field a little more equal. I guess in my mind, in my concept of thinking, I don't really know about it. Y'all?
Well, there used to be somewhat stricter regulations on how much corporations could donate to campaign funds. That went out the fucking window with corporate personhood. When those bills got passed, that opened the fucking door for corporations to expand their already fucked capacity to purchase politicians. I mean, it's already been fucked for a long time that things like lobbying are allowed. That is just legalized bribery of corporations sending a lobbyist with a fat check to buy off politicians and buy some sway there. And that's one of the biggest problems in the way this system is run, is that, you know, these corporations are using their unlimited funds to be able to coerce politicians into serving the corporations instead of serving the people. But it's gotten so bad at this point, excuse me, that even trying to roll that back with a reformist move of, okay, let's take money out of politics, would not go far enough. There's too much damage that's been caused. They have been given too much leeway, and therefore their attitudes of entitlement have grown way too much. For that alone to be effective, they would probably just try to turn around and work some more reformism bullshit to keep it going back and forth in that cha-cha that I refer to this reformist bullshit being, because it's one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. It doesn't get anybody any fucking where. And this is why we call for revolution instead of reformism, because with reformism, whoever comes into power next can walk that shit back. And a huge part of that in recent years has been the deregulation of corporations across the board. And not just when it comes to the corporate campaign funding, but them being allowed to do things that destroy the fucking environment, them being allowed to do things that destroy workers' rights, the whole fucking 9 yards. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen, there's a video that's been getting kicked around social media the last week or so of this guy. I can't remember his name right now, but he's a capitalist cunt And he's going off saying how, oh, well, the workers have it fucked up in our heads, basically, saying that, workers are addressing corporations and saying, you corporations are fucking lucky to have us workers here, because without us, your business would not happen, because that's the fucking truth. And he was saying how that needs to be flipped on its head and workers be put in their fucking place, because capitalist exploiter cunts like himself feel entitled to manipulate every fucking thing that they can in order to, basically undermine the very livelihood of anybody who isn't a member of the bourgeoisie. And he was saying that he wants to see unemployment shoot up to like 50% or more in order to try to, teach the fucking proles a lesson of like, how dare you not be thankful to get to be our corporate slaves, And it's like, motherfucker, you need the wall, or guillotine, or something like that. Like, these kind of people are what I'm talking about when it comes down to that sheer sociopathy that capitalists treat the rest of the world with. They literally fucking feel entitled to do whatever the fuck they want and think that having more money because they've stolen it from everybody who works for them is that form of entitlement. So, reform is shit of removing money from politics, or even from going back to things like what happened after the Great Depression of taxing the wealthiest people at a 90% rate, which still leaves them with more money than their next 100 generations of their family would need to survive. Those things still don't go far enough. It's to the point where it's like, okay, this amount of like exploitation, this should not be allowed, period.
Yes, and another thing that elderly gentleman brought out is, why isn't the working class getting the same, what is it termed as, retirement funds, or why aren't they getting the same as those that are in Congress, or as in the presidency? Why aren't they getting the same pensions? Because it's the working man pension that has paid for their job. So why are they entitled to a higher pension than actually the working man's? This is coming out from, like, I don't know, he must have been like 93 or 94, very old. He said he was in his 90s. Could be 99, I don't know. But that was another point he made. Like, yeah, that's got a good point right there. Like, why would our pensions be any less as working men and women than somebody that's been in Congress or in political stance? They have it all set up like all bourgeoisie also. That's all.
Yeah, they're literally allowed to vote themselves pay raises and increases to their fucking retirement funds and things like that all come at our expense, while not being required to pass legislation to increase our minimum wage, or the funding that goes into our retirement. Instead, they treat the Social Security accounts like their own personal fucking piggy bank, when that was never supposed to be allowed to be touched for anything other than Social Security payments back to the people whose money, that actually is the people whose paychecks that came out of. And some of them have even admitted and acknowledged that anymore the Social Security is literally nothing more than just an extra taxation to remove more spending power from the workers. So, that's another facet that's fucked, and why we need revolution and not reformism, because the system is fucked in so many manners. They should not be allowed to vote themselves raises. We're paying them an average of like $200,000 a year. Plus, all they have to serve is, I think, 4 or 5 years, and they get paid for the rest of their fucking lives. And I'm using the term serve very fucking loosely. That's what they like to call it. They're not serving anybody but themselves and their own fucking interests. But they sit in office catering to the fucking corporations for a handful of years and are immediately entitled to getting those pensions, getting a fucking Cadillac goddamn health care package for the rest of their lives, getting massive retirement. And for what? For fucking what? You know, hell, I don't care. Even, you know, if they are lifelong politicians, guess what? For one, you shouldn't be allowed to be a lifelong politician. The point of you know, there even being political offices, it was supposed to be something that you do temporarily and then you go the fuck back home to your actual job. Being a politician was never meant to be a fucking career. We've got these motherfuckers who have sat in Congress or in the White House for fucking decades, who have lined their pockets, not just with that $200,000 a year fucking salary for Congress, etc., but lining their pockets with, you know, the lobbyists, corporate, you know, dollars being shelled out their way, and oftentimes becoming millionaires or billionaires because of that. That when they finally do leave office, they often have a job lined up working at one of these corporations that they've been on their fucking knees for so many years. So the whole time they were in office, they were exploiting legislation to benefit this company. And what do you know? Now they're CEO of that company, or now they're, you know, some other form of, you know, one of the corporate heads of that company. And it's all self-serving and it shouldn't be fucking allowed. Not one bit of it. Every facet of it is another form of exploiting the people. And they don't give a fuck how much harm we endure because of it. They don't fucking care. Look at the federal minimum wage has been $7.25 for years. And I think it was like 2009 when it got up to that. And let me tell you, 725 wasn't enough to fucking exist off of in the 90s. So where the fuck do they get off thinking that that's even still appropriate to have? Even the people who have been doing this fight for 15, you know, as if a $15 an hour minimum wage, that wasn't enough when they started their fight for 15 bullshit in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you know. It wasn't enough then. It sure as fuck is not enough now. If the minimum wage actually kept up with inflation and production, it would be around $60 fucking an hour at this point. That right there would be a minimum living wage where you're not dealing with some form of destitution or being a paycheck or two away from losing your home. How many people are making that? And we got people out here who are complaining about fast food workers wanting $15 an hour. And it's like, excuse me, that's still not enough to live off of. Even if you're working full time, you're still going to need a fucking second job in most places in this country, because you're not going to be able to afford shit. Unless you got multiple people in your household working and earning that much or more, you're still going to be fucked. I know people who are making over $30 an hour and whose roommates are making in the $20 plus range, and they're still living paycheck to paycheck because it's not enough fucking money. Yet these corporations that they work for are profiting in millions off of each one of them every fucking year, and their labor value and production there. And they're getting a pittance. Congress don't do shit about that. They don't give a fuck because they see their role there as serving those corporate heads instead of serving the people who they are mind fucking into even voting for them in the first place. And, you know, even going back to the voting part, this is why I tell people, wake the fuck up. The only place where your vote actually fucking counts is on the very seldom few numbers of legislation that get put on the ballot because people do ballot drives and gather signatures of like, this is something that we want to implement. That's the only place where your vote fucking counts. Your vote doesn't mean shit if it's an X or a check mark next to a person's name, because those people will never fucking serve you. Go ahead, Sean.
I might lose out here because my phone is on 1% and it is on the charger. I was gonna say that, like, during the pandemic, I had the unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you look at it, um, role of working for a lot of the delivery services, Instacart, most especially, when the shelves were fucking bare. You got penalized for like taking too long, um, while trying to get orders, and people were not fucking responsive when it came to um substitutions and things like that, because there's nothing on the shelves, not a goddamn thing. So if you wanted like some refried beans and there was no fucking beans on the fucking shelf, like, I'm gonna find you some beans, but they're probably not gonna be cooked, and I need you to answer right now so I can get paid properly.
Right.
And like, they were really quick to label us heroes and we keep the world running and blah blah blah, while risking our fucking lives in a global pandemic. And only just last week, one of the things the Fight for 15 campaign was pushing for was a seat at the table. I'm sorry, we need to flip the fucking table because this is bullshit.
Right.
And yeah, they're getting overall raises and better whatever, but these fuckers may give us a seat at the table. They're not really gonna listen though. Because I mean, I worked at Wendy's for, I've had a few food service jobs, but like, I worked at Wendy's during the tail end of the pandemic, and it was awful. Like, people would come in and start filming and like, trying to prove some kind of point. Ooh, hang on a sec. My sister wants to talk to me about something. I'll get back to that point in a minute.
Okay. Joe, do you have any commentary on what on what Sean was saying?
Uh, no, actually, I told him I was grabbing me a little snack.
Okay, right on. You back
But,
with us, Sean? He unmuted for a second and then muted again. I don't know. Goodness. I do have some thoughts, because I've seen a lot of that nervousness out of some of the Door Dashers. I do go through DoorDash a lot to get grocery deliveries, just simply due to my conditions here of you know lack of transportation and being disabled, that like by the time I would pay for an Uber to get to the fucking store and an Uber back and all that, like I'm better off just spending that money with DoorDash to have somebody do the shopping for me. And I've gotten messages from my Door Dashers before, like, oh, I'm so sorry this is taking so long, of like, I'm having trouble finding these things or whatnot. And they're worried about being penalized for taking the extra time to try to find those replacement items. And every time I'm like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I appreciate that you guys are out here providing this service. I definitely ain't tripping about it taking a few extra minutes to find something if the brand of the item I selected isn't in stock, or like if they're picking up food for me from a restaurant and they get there and the food's not ready yet and they're like, I'm so sorry, I'm still waiting. Like, it's okay, no stress, no worries. I'm not gonna fucking complain about that to the company, you know? That's just unfucking cool for anybody who is utilizing those services to want the person who's providing them with that service to be penalized for something taking a few minutes longer when that's out of their hands. That's not their doing. It's not their doing at all.
Yeah,
ahead,
there were so many stories where people were getting in trouble for taking too long and such. I actually got to a point where I started saving messages that I would type up for customers while I was doing DoorDash and Instacart, so I could just go into my clipboard and say, "Hey, look, I'm at the store. I'm looking for the stuff. I want to be there as quick as I can, but could you please, respond to me if I actually need to hit you up about requests or whatever." And yeah, a few people were actually kind of okay with that, but I could tell other people would get fucking upset about it. Like, how dare you want to talk to me? Excuse you? Yeah, no, it got fucking weird. And then I working DoorDash, I had people accuse me of drunk driving twice. Um, I don't even really drink normally. Why would I be drinking on the job?
right?
I mean, I'll smoke a bowl of pot for sure, but
That's different.
that that's years of driving delivery pizzas on a stick shift. Like, I got used to being able to, all right, I'm rolling through town. It's not going very fast. I got time. Because you also don't have time to stop and fucking eat. Um, DoorDash, one of the things that pissed me off most was those heat maps. Um, you'd get bonuses for being in certain areas, and if you don't get a single order, you don't get that bonus. And that bonus means everything to your paycheck. Um, I watched it with Uber and Lyft as well. Like, oh, it was such a pain. And like, I specifically requested to remain in my county because I didn't want to go into Los Angeles County very much, because you just get quagmired down there. You can't get anywhere. Um, I had some lady pick up a ride in the south side of Oxnard in the um what do you call that? Um the industrial sections. And it was from a corporate office. And she told me to step on it because she had to get to Burbank to take a private helicopter to some corporate meeting. I beat her time by a whole 30 minutes.
Wow.
No tip.
What? That's just
From
disrespectful.
Oxnard to Burbank International, no tip.
Wow. Fuck that. I would be so insulted. Oh my God.
And,
No.
and that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to go to have any rides that would take me into LA, or any routes that would take me into LA, because that shit would keep happening and I would get pulled further and further into, the heart of Los Angeles. And I'm like, dude, I live in the 805. I do not want to be delivering for places I don't know, on streets I've never been on, to places whoa, it's sketchy as shit down here. It just, ugh. There were so many frustrations. And, when I did my organizing work, these were some of the things I brought up to the politicians, who were taking our sides for AB5, I believe it was. And then we got that passed. The voters actually passed it. And then Prop 22 was the $200 million campaign that Uber threw against us. And again, we nearly fucking got the votes we needed with our thumbs as volunteers. It was interesting to watch, but like it was never enough. Like I wanted if you were driving Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, all of the heavy vehicle services, these companies are having us use our cars, driving them into the ground for what, 30 cents a gallon? Well, if I'm going to be doing all that and, oh, the fact that Uber makes us pay to get inspections, well, if
True.
you're going to have us pay to get inspections, you should pay for the maintenance on my fucking vehicle that I just
Right.
put fucking 50,000 miles on this year
Right.
that I would not normally have put on there.
Right. That's costing you more in oil changes, having to change your tires more frequently. And that's before getting to any of the other more expensive wear and tear that happens from all that fucking
Insurance.
driving. And it's like, excuse me, maybe Uber should be providing its own fleet of vehicles for you guys to drive and not leaving it
Yeah.
dependent on your personal fucking vehicle.
Right. I mean, because I'm happy to fucking drive people around. You meet some interesting folks. And then you meet some really messy ass folks too. I never had anybody throw up in my car, but I did have somebody steal something off my floor. It was my vape pen, but I had a fucking 2A camera and I was a medical patient. So I called the cops about it. Because I'm sorry, you're actually taking my medicine
Right.
and I know where you live. You dumb fuck. You ordered it from your house. I know where you live.
Right.
Thankfully,
It goes
I
back
was
to that
smart.
self-serving individualist shit.
Well,
Don't
I
give a
had
fuck.
to. I had to because I was driving my late husband's car and he was not leasing it, but buying it on payment plan. And it was a nice little fucking car. I don't want it messed up, and I definitely don't want people stealing out of there. So, I had like signs in the back, hey, this is my personal vehicle. Any damage you do to it, I will be pursuing, whatever. If you want music on, let me know, blah, blah, blah. I tried to make it as nice as I can. But at some point, with all of this extra stuff, aren't I considered a cabbie?
Pretty much, yeah. But you'd have been
And
better off working for an actual cabbie company where you're using their vehicles that they have to fucking maintain, and the responsibility is on them to address it if one of the clients does any damage or anything like that. Not on you.
right. And that's the thing. I watched people try to get into cabbying and they just never fucking made any money. And I'm like, well, how are these cab companies still in existence if nobody's making any fucking money? So, like watching a lot of the parallels in my own life with historical context of activist movements, like there's just so much that has not changed, and it is still the same playbook we're up against. And they've only had time to refine their abilities and, see what works, see what doesn't work. And, like I see a lot of movements get defanged very, very quickly, and I don't know how to get around that. So I mean, some of these book readings are definitely like helpful, and also putting boots to the ground and doing things like that, but expanding this sort of knowledge, and I know both you and Joe do it in your personal lives. I do it through social media. There I'm starting to see kind of a critical juncture of people. Um, I did take the opportunity during Black Lives Matter to remove anybody who is pro-cop or anti-black. And then again during COVID, anybody who was anti-mask, you know they are not gonna have your back at all if anything goes down. They can't even wear a mask. And I'm asthmatic. I can wear a mask all fucking day as long as I'm not doing, like lifting hay bales.
Right.
Um, Actually, I think my asthma improved during all that.
Well, yeah, especially if you were wearing the mask properly, where it's, completely fitted against your face, it's filtering out the particulates that would be triggering your asthma too, not
Yeah.
just, potential pathogens. But most people don't even know how to fucking wear a mask right. It was really annoying to see people like wandering around the grocery store with their mask pulled down below their nose, and it's like, what the fuck do you think that's helping with? That
Oh
ain't
yeah.
doing that ain't doing shit,
Or the ones that were like see-through. Like, come on.
right? Or idiots who would have a hole cut in the mouth area of it to like drink out of their straw.
Um, Actually, that was one set of funny photos. Yeah. That I saw during the pandemic was people who played in like orchestras and shit.
Yeah.
They had holes cut in it.
With a hole for their mouthpiece for their saxophone to go through, and it's like, what are you doing? That you might as well not have it on. It's pointless.
Right.
Fuck. Just ridiculous shit.
Dogtail.
Yeah, she's climbing all over me like, mom, attention now.
Yeah, it's probably about bedtime because we've been later than we usually do a little bit, and it's just us three.
Right. And we're at about 3 hours of recording, 4 hours all together with us hanging out for an hour first. So I see Comrade Joe's got his hand up. So go ahead and speak your thoughts, and then we'll wrap these up.
Yeah, those are my sentiments also. Like maybe we should wrap this up because I'm getting a little tired. But one of the things I wanted to you had asked if what I had to say to Comrade Sean's thing. I had a cousin when I was in Colorado. I was staying with her for a couple months, and she ran after her dog that got out of the fence, and she fell and broke her wrist. Well, she was doing Uber Eats at the time, so she was having a hard time doing that. And she worked as a security guard. She was one of those ones that had to have two jobs to make ends meet. So I said, okay, well, when I have free time or whenever I'm not working, I'll go with you. But I'll tell you that Uber Eats was one of the most stressful things I've ever dealt with in helping someone. It wasn't even my job. I wasn't getting paid for it. But the thing is, like, it's not only the wear and tear on your car or your brakes, but the wear and tear on your mentality, or the more you're putting yourself at risk for having to rush to meet a time quota to certain locations, you're putting yourself and the community at risk just to make it there on time to hopefully you're going to get a tip. I was like, oh man, that is like, this thing
Absolutely.
was a freaking joke to me. I was like, she was like, well, sign up. You can do it too. I was like, well, why in the hell would I do that? If I just go with you and I got a ball on the back of my neck, because it's stressful. I was like, to me, it was stressful. I'd rather just work with what I normally do. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
No, you're absolutely right though. Even though my generation and a few of the older folks who I saw were really well adapted to this sort of kind of work. Like I love the work. I absolutely love the ability to be on my own all day playing jams I like. um but these arbitrary deadlines that you get penalized for, like I had the ones that were the absolute worst for me because I knew every time I did it, it was mostly no tips. is when they would pile like 3 or 4 on, and they're not like close. Oh, sure, they look close on the map, but if you know that town, you're talking at least 20 plus minutes in traffic. And, you know, just getting from one restaurant to another, never mind going from the restaurant to the client. And there's nothing you can really do about it. You can't deny the orders, because otherwise you stop getting orders. What's the fucking point then?
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of like, I don't know, a freaking joke. But anyway, comrades, I know it's getting late, and revolutionary love, all power to the people. I think I'll probably watch me a boring movie and take my little happy ass to sleep.
Sounds like an excellent plan. Personally, I'm gonna have to call me an Uber to go up to the gas station and get cigarettes. Tip the fuck
That's
out of
okay.
them for it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I think I got 3 cigarettes left. That'll last me to tomorrow when my backup arrives and stuff. But anyway, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure talking. Always a pleasure listening in. Always a pleasure learning. I think we're all in the right direction, and let's just stay strong.
Absolutely.
It was lovely chatting with you all tonight. Good night, revolutionary love.
All right.
Absolutely. Panther love and all power. Thank you
All
for
power.
joining us tonight.
Stay strong.
You too, comrade. We'll see y'all tomorrow for part 2 of Seize the Time.
Okay.
And I
Good
think
night.
the hour changed on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh shit.
Yes, that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. That we rendezvous for Seize the Time.
4 p.m. California time. 4 p.m. 5 p.m. Colorado time. Is that correct?
765. Yeah, that would be. Oh shit, it's fucking me up. Colorado's on Mountain Time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 p.m. Colorado time, 4 p.m. if you're still on Pacific.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Then
Your
we'll
cell phone should switch over quite nicely all by itself. Any house clocks, though, you're on your own.
Right.
well, you know, and it gets hard because I go on so many study groups and so many meetings, and it's hard to keep track of all of them. So I gotta, I guess, give myself a mental awareness thing. I wish I knew how better to do that and put it on my phone to like set an alarm for it, but I try to keep it in my mental alarm, but I guess that doesn't always work. I'm a little goofy sometimes.
Well, if you want, oh, excuse my yawns. I'm getting tired too. If you want, I can text you some instructions that might help with setting the alarm in your calendar.
Oh, okay, most definitely. And I know the hour changed for Tuesday, so that's what kind of threw me off this past time. But so 4 o'clock, I'll be ready.
Okay.
Or you
And
could always send me a message like, "Hey, brother," and I'll be like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, those have been helping me out quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of
right. So I'm
okay.
glad we put together the group chat on Facebook too. So that way, like if you don't hear signal ding, you'll hear Facebook ding
Yeah.
when I'm like, okay, here's the link, Zoom's open.
Exactly.
It helps.
And like I
Hell
said
yeah.
the other night, like thanks for all the work you put in, sisters, and like
Well,
you make it happen.
thank you. I try.
Okay. All right. Good night.
Yeah, if we don't leave now, we're not gonna leave.
Hell yeah.
All right.
All
All right,
power.
stop for now.